Hello, welcome friends. Hi, Jeannie. Welcome back.
Yay.
It's Cyndi Silva with Energetic Wisdom. This podcast, I've invited my friend Jeannie back as a regular guest. Love having you. I love the space that gets created between us and the playfulness.
I'm loving the image of the regular because I used to work in a diner, right? And there'd be your regular, well, it was in New Hampshire, your regulars, right? And they'd be down at the end of the bar in the same seat every time, want their coffee the same way,
Yeah,
their eggs in the same way. So here I am,
like
one of your regulars.
like cheers, except no, that was exactly the opposite of what I was going to say, is that we were going to, instead of picking a topic, we're going to create this openness to have a conversation, and then we'll name the topic afterwards. That's kind of like
That's fun.
letting the baby reveal itself to you, so you can give it the space it needs to show you its spirit, instead of naming the baby or giving it an occupation as soon as it takes its first breath and conditioning it to be that.
Right.
We're going to open the space for whatever wants to arise. So thank
Awesome.
you for being an irregular regular.
Yay. You're welcome. It's
How does
fun.
that feel? What comes up about this idea of irregularity?
Oh, I don't know. I was just laughing because when you go bargain shopping and there's a bin with irregulars, right? So the regulars are the people at the end of the bar who have their coffee just so. And then the irregulars are like the ones in the bin that like only one person would ever like because like the arms are too long, but you have long arms.
Uh-huh. And they're the ones you can't return.
Yeah, unique, and maybe a little bit bent.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
I think it was Marge Percy who, I think you say her name, Percy, the poet. She said something about how, once the lid came off, she grew like a wild weed. And I always loved that image of
Mhm.
how when we kind of come out of our straitjacket of conditioning and we follow what's alive, we start to grow like a wild weed and become
Mhm.
our very own, whatever it is. So that sounds
Yeah.
fun because in our uniqueness is, I think, where we also inspire others, not only to be their uniqueness, but something you may say from your unique vantage point, maybe something no one else has thought of or a lens no one else has looked through. So that's
Mhm.
pretty exciting.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's what this is about. These conversations is really just to open up space for perspectives. And I like this idea of a wild weed, because it's like everyone's standing around going, well, what is it? I think it's this. No, it looks more like this. And you really can't identify it. You can't like pigeonhole it into being something that that you're familiar with.
The other thing that arises for me in this conversation is the word, which I really love, this word emergent. And when we start to be surrendered to being, which some of us are like, oh, goody, surrendered to being. Some of us are like, oh, crap, my mind doesn't work the same way anymore. But when we settle into kind of being immersed in what I call zero or being, what rises in that space is purely creative. And many of us feel like we can't live that way. We couldn't talk that way. We couldn't do an interview without any preparation. This is what I love about you. One of the things is that you're willing, and you've always been willing. I remember our first interview. It's like, oh, or conversation, whatever you call these things. That willingness to just leap out into the unknown and let the kind of the momentum and the growth of the moment, it reminds me of just how everything organic grows. It in each moment it kind of unfurls and you have no idea what it's actually going to do.
Mm.
Yeah, so I like that. I like being in that purely creative space, like, oh, wonder what's going to come.
Yeah. Yeah, this freshness, right? It's not um, something that you're trying to repeat or something you read out of a book. It's just showing up in the moment and
No recipe.
allowing what's present. Yeah, no recipe.
Which
not
means you may
not
cook
to
some
be
horrible shite, or may turn into this thing no one's ever. My daughter's amazing. We'll go in the kitchen. One of us will do set things from intuition, the other will, and mine usually end up not so wonderful. Hers are like she was born kind of with this amazing. ability to be emergent in the kitchen. I kind
Mhm.
of stick to the recipes, but not other places.
I
Yeah,
love that. Yeah. This alchemy, it's kind of like an alchemy, right? Like
totally.
pulling these pieces in and just having a sense of a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And, um, I think some of these recipes we come up with in this spontaneous space, they're not repeatable, which is what makes them fresh and creative. You never can reproduce it,
Yeah,
which is what makes you want to be so present in the moment. Because if you're not, you'll miss it. Yeah.
yeah. And the other thing that I'm really noticing is how the yang of structure supports the yin of kind of sinking down into the moment to allow what happens to happen, because we have a structure, we have a time when we're going to meet, we have this Zoom thing, we have a beginning and an end, and there's something about that. I always love this combination. Like if someone says, will you talk about this in this many minutes, like if I'm speaking at a church or something, it's like, oh goody, let's watch the creativity dance within the set limitation. And I think, to me, the holy's kind of glorified in those settings. It's like, can you be wild and free within these rules? Can you be at this event completely wild and yet honoring the structure? Unless, of course, Holy Will says don't honor the structure, which also can happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting you bring it up. I think it can go both ways. Like I think also that the yin is the structure for the yang as well. Like the body is yin. There's a physical earthy structure to the body and all things physical in this third dimensional reality. And then the formless yang energy gets to kind of play hide and seek through these forms, the consciousness. So I think it works both ways with yin and yang. Sometimes the yin is the structure, sometimes it's the emerging unknown that gets revealed through the structure, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's emerging in your awareness now? Is there a particular, there is something emerging for me I want to share,
Go ahead.
that's fresh.
Yeah,
And
I do.
it's the Teresa of Avila interior castle. And that there's these rooms in in our own interior, like in a castle, kind of like archetypes that are spacious, and we have a different experience of these kind of rooms or these spaces inside of ourselves that get occupied um, by our own um, relation to life and presence, and also as we're interacting with other people, different rooms, the lights come on in these different rooms, and we kind of speak from that place or share from that place. And I wonder if you've explored that work at all, or have this heard of this concept of the interior castle, or have another version of that you
Huh. No. um, I know of the work and I've read a bit of her, but I'm not familiar. And honestly, here, um, mm, my experience of my own interior, which has changed a lot from, earlier experiences of my interior. It's almost like there is no interior here, or everything is interior. It just feels like a great hall of quiet, and then, you know, as I rest there, you know, a certain thing might emerge or bubble up, but I don't experience. I don't even, in a way, experience. I was going to say myself, like, or any flavor, um, until the quiet sort of throws something up, like the ocean throws up a shell or something. So I'm interested to hear what that's like, because, or what it is that you're referring to, or what St. Teresa's referring to, because my consciousness is like kind of it's just like Yep, here we are at the ocean.
I love it. Well, but we should give some context to that because for those that are listening that haven't met Jeannie yet, Jeannie's um, on the other side of Dark Night of the Soul. So it feels like I love when you said the Great Hall of openness, or I think you referred to it
Yeah.
similar to that. It was almost like this Dark Night came in and took all the walls down, and now it's just this big open space, which is really fascinating because I see a lot of that in architecture now, where a lot of the architectural design is to have big open space rather than these sectioned off uh, separate rooms. So I feel like what's happening like archaeologically inside of our own interior is getting reflected in our architecture, right? Externally.
Yeah, which is funny because the kind of houses I'm attracted to are the ones that are old and have lots of little rooms with doors. So go.
Needing that. Yeah. Isn't that how interesting how we balance? We attract the balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something, everywhere you look, like everywhere you look, there's God. And so whether we look in the high and the wide and the open, or we look in the little secret hidden passageways that when you open the door, there's a surprise there. It's like no matter what we entertain, and I imagine in different moods we might, I remember being on a trip where I was doing a retreat, and I was in a community um, in an area in Seattle, and my then assistant Simone and I were kind of exploring this place where these people lived, and it was kind of like this place, this community that was built with big lots of land and houses, and then they had created this chapel, and I think the chapel was in honor of one of the builder's daughters who had passed or something like this. This was back, I think, in the 20s. Anyway, the chapel was really gorgeous, and we walked in and the space was just wide open and lovely, and Simone can sing really well, and she just started to sing, and so it's like we can, I forget where I started with this, but just that the wide open spaciousness or coming to the ocean, you know and I grew up in New England, where you just see a strip of sky up above. You don't see a big sky generally, and then come out and live in New Mexico, big wide open sky. And so all of those kind of evoke a different aspect of the beauty, and can be a different medicine for us depending upon where we are, what's going on in our lives. you know Yeah, I forget where that started, but I just had this image of that wide open little chapel and Simone singing in it.
Yeah. Feels like open space draws something else forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
The compartmentalizing.
Yeah. It's like if it were a sound, it would be like, oh.
Yeah. The eyes go poof, pop.
Yeah, really,
Like pop.
oh.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I had an experience similar to that. We were hiking in Zion at the Emerald Pools,
Yeah, yeah.
and there's three of them, and we hiked to the upper Emerald Pool, and I entered this space, and it was that whoa, and I couldn't believe people. There were other people there, um, and they were all chatting and talking and
I know.
laughing, and I was like, "What are
Sacrilege.
you doing? Like this is like incredible
This is
energy doing."
church.
Oh, it was so
Yeah.
amazing. And so I just was like, oh, yeah, I was just, whoa, taken back by the energy, and um, walked out into the middle of the pond. There was a little patch of sand there, and started doing my Qigong and just kind of pulling all that energy towards me. And I was realizing, like, not then, but later in hindsight, that the shape of this container, like these sheer cliffs, this openness, and this pond and reflective, it's like it was resonating with a shape inside myself. And
Beautiful.
it was like a tuning fork went
Yeah.
off, and just this vibration of being inside myself in a way, inside the shape. It was just
Yeah.
like these two shapes came together, um, one inside the other, and this resonance was just pinging on every nerve.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's what's, I think, amazing about I wish I could quote an exact author from history, or a spiritual teacher or whatever, but there's, they say that the human being is like a microcosm of the everything, right?
Yeah.
And that the cliffs and the mountains and the chasms, they all exist within us.
Mhm.
And what's so amazingly paradoxically beautiful is that, like, I can say this thing about like this inner hall or oceanic emptiness, right? And yet then, and any of us can find this, like a certain landscape at a certain time, or does what you're talking about, brings something forward that's in us, brings something invisible forward. It's not like we can go inside and see the walls of the rock inside our beings, but there's
Mhm.
something about that the energetics brought by the shape and the whatever, that is speaking to something inside, something that is only perceptible through this kind of uh, extra sense, and I was feeling as you were talking about the people chatting, and that frequently happens at hot springs as well for me, having lived in Colorado, New Mexico a lot and being like a hot spring junkie, you know. And I remember once actually in Southern California, when I was in New Hampshire, I'd never been in a hot spring, finding a hot spring and going on this journey to find it, crossing this river. It was like this epic journey for me, only to find this born again Christian fellow in the tub who would not shut up about his version of God. After I'd spent like hours and hours and hours trying to get to this beautiful place to commune in there, I had to work on my assertiveness to please ask him to button it for a bit, that my sense of God was a little bit bigger than the words he was speaking in that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do have a different orientation sometimes. And
Yeah, the sensitivity to feel. I mean, now, right? That I didn't used to be sensitive like this, or at least I wasn't aware at that level, too much personal gunk, numbness, whatever. And people often are called too sensitive and they feel bad about how sensitive they are. But oh my gosh, those same senses that may be overwhelmed by the din and the clang of the marketplace, when put in a place where
mm,
all there is to do is pick up the subtle energies and the beauties, and they blare. It's almost like, how did I ever not hear or sense this when I was younger? But I didn't. That everywhere I go, if I tune in, things are humming and singing in their own way, including my own instrument. Like right now as we sit here, and
mhm.
that's what I love about sitting with you, like different beings. When I connect, it's kind of like a wine tasting. It's like, oh, it's not only your energy, it's what is creatively evoked by us putting our Shazam rings together and just sitting here.
She's hammering. Yeah, I see it. Like these two rings coming together and creating that Vesica Pisces. Yeah, and that
Oh, beautiful.
formed in the middle there is like something now bubbling up and out, just kind of circulating through the field. And we're kind of pulling a thread here and there and tasting it. Like you say, the wine, it's a wine fountain.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, sensitivity is really a theme for me and the clients I work with. I see that a lot in their design, and I tend to attract it. And it's really an honor to acknowledge people for their sensitivity, because they've spent a lot of their life force energy protecting themselves from it, and
yeah,
to help them see that it's actually um, a gift for
yeah.
others, and not um, something that they need, they
I
did
had
need
to
to
cap.
defend against for a while, but now it's more like, yes, this is, it's kind of, I feel, essential in these times where there's so much uncertainty and there's no fact, it's all sort of speculation. Our sensitivity is going to be um, so key and important to tracking where we need to be and with whom.
Oh, so true. I was just thinking that very thing that um, a lot of times what I find, and this was a learning for my own self. How do I say this? It's like listening to the sensitivity and to the mistakes we make about not protecting ourselves, or like conditioning tells us, oh, good, go do that. That will be a good thing. Or, oh, go be there. That's what a good spiritual person does. And as we listen to our sensitivity, we've been taught, don't listen to that. That's your brokenness. Overcome it, overcome it, overcome it. But the turning toward it and the doing the things that might look like pulling away from the world, or not having as many relationships, or being picky about who we spend time with, we look weirder and weirder. And the conditioning in the head says, oh my God, you don't have as many friendships. What's going to become of you? You can't be a cat lady alone in your place. But that the very listening to that unique, almost like inability, or what does overwhelm or what doesn't feed, and fine tuning the structure within which we operate
Mm.
allows the sensitivity. It's like, okay, now it's not being used for overwhelm. We're not just, now we're building. I always talk about it like a setting with a ring. Here's the jewel. It needs a certain setting to be glorified, to be used,
Mm-hmm.
and to start to value and listen to sensitivity. That's like a huge transition, I feel, in embodiment, to
Yeah.
actually realize you're not just a broken widget. You're not different from everyone because you're screwed up, although we all have our little screw up spots. But potentially why you're different is because there's a gift there. And
Yeah.
if you honor it and listen to the call of actually what you need and what you don't need, it's been so huge in my life. The transformation of how I live so that I can bring myself well, rested, firing on all cylinders to the work that I'm to do. I don't do the things I used to do, and happily so. Although the transition was like, what? I'm getting weirder and weirder.
Yeah. Well, that might be what's required. The was it Krishnamurti that said, to be well adjusted to insanely sick society is no measure of health.
Yeah, exactly. That's such a great quote.
Love it. Yeah, I want to go back to that word weakness. And sometimes, sensitivity being associated with the word weakness. And that word came up in a conversation I was having recently with a group. And we were looking at this term weakness and trying to understand the context it was being used, and in relationship to the I Ching, where the hexagram has the solid and the broken line. The broken line is sometimes referred to as weakness, but it's not a weakness, it's a sensitivity, it's a receptivity. So
Yes.
there's
That's what I see as yin. That's what I
yeah,
label yin. Yeah.
yeah, and in the whole the second hexagram, it's all broken lines, it's all the number 2, it's receptive. That's the yin.
Yeah. Yeah. Which has, if we plumb the depths of it, this is my experience over and over and over. The doors to yin are inability, exhaustion, sickness, all these things where we're stopped cold and we have to go down. We
Yeah.
have to construct that. At first it feels like I'm weak, I can't master,
Right.
right? But then as we sink down, as we're forced often to sink down, we become, in a way, a queen of the underworld, comfortable in nowhere, comfortable in nothing, so that when we walk into the world, there's this underlying comfort with the gap out of which everything sprouts. And it's been amazing to watch how yin is the mother of strength and the mother of true yang, but we would never
Right.
suspect that. I love how our conversation is going all over the place. It's so great. It's like, let's see what we can't touch in this hour.
Yes. Oh, well, this other word that comes up related to yin, um, and it weakness is actually tenderness.
Yes. Yes. There's a place. I remember I was getting prolotherapy on my shoulder. I had a frozen shoulder, and someone said prolotherapy is the thing. So I went and did this
I
thing,
don't
even
know
though,
what that is.
okay, I'm gonna tell you. They take a needle about this long and
Oh,
they stick it straight into your joint without any anesthesia and pump a little very simple solution. I forget what's in it, like salt and water or something like this, that somehow allows the tight things to loosen and the loose things to tighten. Anyway, it worked.
mm,
But and a very nice woman naturopath was administering this to me. I knew what it was going to be like. And, I kind of pride myself on what a badass I am with pain. So I was like, yeah, no problem. Bring it on. I've given birth, no problem. And I'm lying there and she's piercing my shoulder with this thing, and at the time I wasn't thinking about Saint Teresa and the angel. Is that the one that had the vision and was pierced by an arrow that an angel had? And there's a very famous sculpture of that. It's just so beautiful. She's like in kind of this weird rapture.
yeah, yeah. I think
But
where I work like that.
when I saw that sculpture, I was like, that was my prolotherapy experience.
Mm,
So here it is. I'm basically, even though the whole creature of the body is like, punch that woman and run. That's what the survival system is saying as the needle's going in, right? I'm like, no, this is actually good. And I just kept letting myself open, soften, yield, open, soften. And in the heart of that was this beauty that was like impossible to speak. It was like such tenderness, such softness, such openness. I felt like a pile of ash, like that soft. Like if a
mhm.
twig burns in a fire and you see just that white ash, there's nothing left but kind of the soft, shapeless shape, the shape, but it's in the middle of just, it was so soft and so beautiful. I was in bliss because I had just let myself, yes, 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 yes. And I think that was a reflection of what was forced on me in the dark night, right?
Mm,
And and life is just going, no, you don't get to move. And you're going, fight it, fight it. And then after a while, it's like you lose and you just open, or in like an experience with like some kind of a journey, like a journey with a sacred plant medicine or something, where you're just held there and you have to open. And that's the lesson. To me, that's like the lesson of yin. And that very thing we would call weak, like how weak, how non-existent in strength is a powdered twig that's only ash. And yet what we fall back into is so, it's the ground of being. It's like the utter, like nothing more powerful than the oceanic bed of being from which everything is birthed, and that feeling. And so I love to get very, because I have been one, very young women. It's like single moms who can do anything on their own and they're exhausted, but they're gonna keep, at some point they hit a wall. It's like, hey, can you just sit on your couch and just lean up against the pillows? Can you go find an oak tree? Lean into the oak tree. Can you find a friend and lean into a friend? And sometimes that's the alchemical beauty of having someone sort of more yang in one's life, is like leaning into that yang. We would think of, oh, that's so weak. And yet that capacity to sink down into nothing, to soften, open, it's a superpower. I'm convinced of it, and one that we have way yet to tap. And I think one that's like the superpower of our age right now.
mm. Yeah, feels like this tapping into this refined presence that we are, that is the body, but beyond the body. I had a harsh experience of that. Um, I'm going to share it, and it's maybe
Yeah.
related or not, but I had.
We'll see. We'll see in the end how
we'll
how
make
it's related, because of course it's related.
we'll make it relate. No,
If
I was
anybody can, we can.
was that, um, yeah, hardworking, forcing things to happen. And I hit that wall and ended up depleted, had to have a surgery on one of my kidneys. And it was, it took me out of a profession, right, that I never would have left because the money was good and there was a lot of good things about it that I had identified with. And to just be the one to say, yeah, I'm done with that. That wasn't going to happen. So I had to have something come in and,
Exactly.
no, you're not doing this anymore. So the kidney issue. So I had to have this surgery. And, in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are the deepest organ in the body. Was deep, and they represent fear and in their imbalanced state. And it's the vital life force. I think of them as very yin. And so I had surgery, but I wasn't operated on. I was operated on by a human, but this human was operating a robot that was actually operating on me. So my body was immobilized by anesthetized, right? But it was still, this is my theory. My body's laying there immobilized, but it's awake, even though my consciousness isn't there. This machine comes in and starts cutting into my body, the creature, and the surgery, is successful in that sense. But afterwards,
Oh, yeah.
I had such PTSD.
Yeah.
I could not get on an airplane. I had such a claustrophobia. My creature body just didn't trust my mind anymore because I put it in this position of terror. It was
Yeah.
terrorized. And it took me
Yeah.
about 5 years to get that out of my system and be able to fly again without having an anxiety and panic attack, because it was in this other, whenever it would be put in a situation where it didn't have any control, it would just
Totally.
freak out like a wounded animal.
I love this line of inquiry. Totally. Like I think of people who've been tortured, or because you could see that prolotherapy that I had as a form of torture. You could see Christ on the cross being nailed to a cross as a form of torture. And there is, and when you're not conscious, but your body, this is what we think, oh, she's out, so she's not going to remember any of this. Well, the body actually went through that and it was invasive. It was like it's invasive for prolotherapy, like it's invasive.
Light, can I suggest
Yeah.
bugging me like
Like it's invasive to be crucified. And
yeah,
there's something to me fascinating about
it's terrible.
how something is the same thing, maybe even for the same person, the same thing. I don't know how to say this because there's no less than, greater than, oh gosh, now we're accomplished or any of that, because who knows? It's all mystery. But what I'm trying to peer into, and I'm always kind of fascinated by, is in the model of Christ on the cross. He's going willingly. He's chosen this. Like there are plenty of options to get out of Dodge. And he says, no, he keeps walking toward the will of the holy, even though he can see it, as it's portrayed, how it ends. He walks willingly, and he's even right in the middle of experiencing this thing, like seeing the goodness of his torturers, seeing the goodness of those poor sweet people. Forgive them, Father, they don't know what they do. And this prolotherapy place where that thing that would have been torture was actually the servant of some amazing opening. And to me, the only difference between something being torture or something being a vehicle for Baba, transcendence, is how overwhelming it is for our capacities in the moment. And it seems to me that in the places where I've been very deeply, penetrated by life in challenging ways, hurt, we call it, where people carry trauma, that experience for you, there is some, even if it's traumatizing, there's some initiation by how deeply we are penetrated.
Yeah.
And when you clean the trauma out, you digest the emotion from it, you are now privy to a depth, a truth about life, about your own being. You probably couldn't even put into damn words, because I can't put into words the
Mhm.
things that you are instructed in by being pierced to that level, and then digesting, clearing out, integrating whatever the lesson was. We kind of think of, oh, I got hurt, oh, I got traumatized, that was a bad thing. And of course, holy hell, who would choose any of that? And yeah, there is something that's just like, no thank you, right? That was heinous. But there's also something, at least in my experience, and I can tell by you nodding, that those deep things, though we wouldn't choose them, and though we might want a gentler way, they pierce us to a depth that ends up being metabolized into a level of wisdom that is not common, because most of us are running around with very undigested. We can't, how do we digest all these? We get too many lessons. Thank you very much. Can you hold the lessons so I can digest some of them, please?
Yeah. Thank you. Resonating with all of it reminds me, I'm going to bring in the hexagrams again, because there's always
Yeah, it's awesome.
the 51st hexagram is called Thunder Over Thunder, and it's the gate of shock. And
Ah,
and even in Gurdjieff's work, he talks about there's no awakening without shock.
wow. Very interesting.
So there's a shock, and then that what you say of the processing of that shock that opens up the container, if you will, the vessel, the space, going back to the beginning of our conversation, breaking down those walls and creating,
Right. It cracks the vessel and dumps you into a bigger vessel.
yeah, that's it, being absorbed into the next expanded version of the container that you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yum.
I'm just feeling such like reverberations of reverence in my being right now for just um, the redemption, in a way, the redemption of the wound, the redemption of hurt. We think of hurt or our woundedness or our places of inability as, the places where we're somehow screwed up or hopeless or handicapped or whatever. And surely those places can give us levels of limitation, but even levels of limitation drive us deeper, so that the places of woundedness are actually like the places of genius in a way, or the
Mhm.
doors to deep wisdom. And our culture has this model of get over it, compensate for it, function on top of it, rather than hold your horses. There is a chasm opening to the depth of you that is calling you downward to heal and descend and reap the gems of whatever that intense initiation was. And we so need guides, guides to that, psychopomps, I think is one of the words for them, like people who can uh, walk between the worlds of the everyday and the kind of deep inner psychic kind of places.
Yeah. I have another quote for that.
Awesome, you go.
This one I believe is from
We are like the mystic and the scholar in a certain way. Like you have a very like scholarly way of approaching this kind of thing, and I'm like, oh no, but it's like this. And I love the conversation between those two styles.
Yeah, well, I think we both have both, but I
Yeah,
believe it's
definitely.
Carl Jung said, what the psychotics are drowning in, the mystics are swimming in.
Yeah,
So
totally.
it takes, these experiences of swimming with your learning how to swim
Yeah,
in the experience of practically drowning.
yeah,
And
yeah. Which to me is so much these days the fruit of all the research into trauma. Which,
right,
how do we support the creature of the body
right.
to find ground, breath, orientation,
Mhm.
resilience at sea? Because when we are presented with these things, that's why they're traumatizing, because we don't have the resource, we don't have the support. Often we're too young. We're too young to be like, forgive them, Father. They don't know what they do. We're not there. We're like, hey, you jerk, you just messed me up,
Yeah.
because we don't have both the kind of large perspective and support to maintain it that we might have. I taught my daughter that people who were mean basically were people with owies in their hearts. That's what we called it, to the point where she literally perceived the kids in her class who were mean as having owies in their hearts. And on Valentine's Day one year, we were making these, well, I was supporting her to make these little Valentine's people. They had heart heads. And then, this was back in the day before kind of gender neutrality, right? So we were making like the girls with little skirts, even though like we were both these like very androgynous kind of female types, she and I. Nevertheless, we were making the girl ones with skirts and the boy ones with little pants. And she said, "Oh, Mama, this is the best one." We had decided that one that she had made was the best one. And she said, "I'm going to give it to, let's just say Bobby." I won't say the kid's name, but she said, "I'm going to give it to Bobby because Bobby has the most owies in his heart. And so I want this to be like for him." And this was a kid who was like regularly mean to the other kids, right? And then she comes home after Valentine's Day. She goes, "Mama, it worked. I watched him open it and he had this little smile when it came out." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're a little soul doctor, girl."
Right.
But that perspective, so important. We're fed from so young the messages of separation. That's a bad boy. Stay away from that bad boy, because that's just a bad boy, extrapolating his troubles to the quality of his heart, to the quality of his soul, and sticking him in that cell forever, versus that sense, oh, this is someone alive with owies who can be reached to because he has a heart like my heart, and I feel like that's such a huge way. We can't help it. We have the sight we have the ignorance we have the delusions we have as parents. But I watch how key it is that children get real information about what's going on, from which to make sense of what they see.
Yeah, very important to still that when we're young. We didn't get that. And it's really, I feel, surfacing with, we spoke about this shock on an individual level, and now it feels like we're going through a collective shock and the collective trauma that's coming up. We need to have people that are like islands of coherence, islands of self-regulation, that not beyond your own ability to regulate your nervous system, you're a source for others to regulate.
Yeah.
So I feel that there's a big wave of collective trauma surfacing, and if we haven't come to that place where you describe about seeing people with owies on their hearts, and having compassion, we're going to be doing a lot of projecting that's not going to be helpful.
No, it just keeps us being blind and like stabbing each other.
Yeah, literally, like.
I was just thinking about when COVID started and everyone was we were all in monk cells in a certain way. We were all like forced into our monk cells. Some of us were alone in our monk cells. Some of us were sealed in with a few other monks, right? Like, talk about a wildly broad alchemical. We all went on retreat, forced retreat, right? And so many people, I remember right when it happened, I was like, oh my God, the people need some help. And I just started doing these free COVID things on being with uncertainty and different topics. And they're still actually in my school, all those like COVID things. I should go back because it's pretty dear, just to see the history through those classes, right? But how much people were just craving the voice and smile of someone who was plugged into something deeper than the freak.
Right.
And how much Doesn't matter. It's like you were talking about us, I think before we started recording, like being, I forget the animals you were talking about, but like the wolf pack. What were the animals you were saying? It was something.
Pod,
Yeah, the
elephant
pod.
pod.
The
Yeah.
pod. Yes. That below our awareness, our bodies recognize the energy of all is well, there is no threat. And we are craving being able to plug into something. And of course, love, God, is the essential source of that. I mean, there's Jesus with the hugest threat you could imagine, someone nailing you to the cross. He's not in survival at all. He's in, I and my Father are one. I am in, and this is where I was in the prolotherapy, right? It's like, okay, you're sticking me in the arm, and the creature wants to roar. But as I open, there's something deeper here. And that's something deeper. When we speak from that, we can soothe millions if we're just given the mic for a second. I mean, some people will be repelled. Some people be like, what's that woman on narcotics talking about anyway? I always wanted to, like on the 4th of July, at the bicentennial or something, when there's just like thousands of people gathered, millions, just give me the podium for a sec. It's like, hello. Drop into your bodies, like collective soothing,
Yeah.
I put some stuff on YouTube for that. It's just like, hello. All is well from this place eternally. Even if the body is literally in danger on a creature level, love, eternity, God, who we are as light is not ever threatened.
Yeah.
And man, what an amazing thing to be able to offer to, your neighbors who are freaking out because of this or that. It's beyond reason. It's not reason. It's not like you say, oh, everything's going to be fine because blah, blah, blah. It's just the energy of fine.
Yeah.
That we understand.
Yeah, I can appreciate that in the work that we do, which is very different, but similar in the sense that our objective is to not get people to depend on us for their ability to regulate, but to connect them to the part of themselves that's always
Yes.
regulated and
Yes.
always present.
Find tools.
Yeah. That's it. You don't want to, it's okay to have people to co-regulate with, but the objective is to be able to feel that within yourself and connect to that that's always there, and find a way to make it available through the structure of your life, your environment, which kind of comes back to what you had an idea of, with our topic being about how to live a life of spirituality. How do you do that? How do you move in a way that um, is is a sort of orbiting around this central core of the essence,
Yeah.
rather than seeking it, right? Your movement is more of a dance in relationship to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see the first part of my life as a kind of a, ridiculous flailing, looking for the source of that. And that's a whole thing, right? Looking for the source of that. And I was utterly dependent in a certain way when I was in the dark night and my body was freaking out. I was utterly dependent upon a few teachers and nature to help me soothe, utterly dependent. And just like, the someone once told me that the Dene people see the mother as the temporary stand-in for the earth, that if you mother someone properly, you hold them, you're an extension of the earth, you soothe them, then when you put them down on the earth, they feel the earth as mother, their own ground,
I
the
got the
sky
chills.
above.
Yeah, I feel
All
that
that.
all over my body.
Yes, and many of us haven't gotten that. And so whether it's a therapist or a teacher or a tree or a teddy bear, um, to cobble together some kind of good enough mother, there's no shame, because here we are, fingers on a hand. We don't have to John Wayne it. We can find people, and we have to be careful to find trustworthy people who aren't like fostering a dependence for their own personal gain, but are actually servants of the one love, right? That we can lean for a while because we need that leads then to hatching and flying
Yeah.
and finding it on our own.
Mhm.
But I find a lot of people are so, because dependence has been given such an evil name in our culture. Like, I think my dad once said, like, when I get too old to be independent, just take me out back and shoot me. Like this fear of dependence, when really in dependence there is a beauty. Um, it's the beauty of yin again, but a momentary dependence on a friend or whatever that's solid allows us to birth that stability or resilience in ourselves. That's why therapy is so great when it works, is that we have someone who's dedicated to hold us in that shell until the yolk turns into a chick and bobbles on out.
Mhm. Mm.
I know for sure in my life, I can think of so many beings who served my um, emergence. I have such gratitude for them because I absolutely needed them, like I needed the air I breathed at the time.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think maybe nature gave us a really strong clue about that when it designed our species as the one who needs to be, you know, for the first 18 years of our life.
Mama, and maybe sometimes beyond.
Right. Other
Sometimes
species,
just,
it's like, few months, you're up
yeah,
and
really,
running, and you're on your own.
really. Out of the nest with you.
Our
Good luck.
dependence is wired in to need each other, to need,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and in the mama and the papa, right? To prevent your child from being food for another something.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my daughter is just, she graduated college last May.
Hmm.
Uh, it really is an interesting transition. And it's been happening since birth, right? Like as soon as they come out of your body, they're leaving you little by little by little, growing skills, not needing you, whatever. It's such a beautiful um, privilege to be that close to a being from conception to flowering and
Hmm.
watch that, surging forward, getting a little scared, leaning back in, and it's such a beautiful thing being that mama thing, and then weaning, as they wean from us, we wean from them, right? Like I have a servant heart. There's nothing I love more than to be a servant for the beings that I love. But if I'm like being too much of a servant, she doesn't develop her legs, right?
Right,
So
right.
it's been really just such an interesting time in that way.
Yeah, it leads me to think of another whole direction here with if this
I
conversation
think we're almost at an hour too.
elasticity. Are we at an hour
Just
already?
talk for like, let's just talk for 6 hours
Oh
and
gosh.
just say it all.
Okay. But this may be for another time, but I'll introduce it because not only are our offspring here to yeah, be that which you described, but they're also replacing us. Yeah.
That's for sure. Oh, that's for sure.
And
Sometimes I feel like the rotting log out of which the mushroom is growing.
you're so yin, the rotting log.
Hi.
But I think, what I want to just create a bridge for this potential of a conversation in the future to say, because this is my passion, this is where I love to
Awesome.
dig in, is that not only do our children replace us, right? Um, but we're being replaced by another species. We're going through an evolutionary change similar to history where the Neanderthals were replaced by Cro-Magnon and on and on. This is happening now.
My daughter would completely concur.
Yeah, we're being replaced
That's
by
my
this other,
mom.
and it's like, I think I feel it's the first time, possibly in my limited perspective, I feel that it's possibly the first time in human evolution where we can actually be conscious of this change. that we're being replaced by these beings that are coming in with this, all the differences in the way that these new beings are oriented to life. Um, and can we, rather than be threatened by that and try to destroy them, can we open our hearts and
Oh,
our minds and embrace and support the deconstruction of structures that don't support the sensitivity of these beings and the creativity and the uniqueness, and create new structures that celebrate this, even
and
though it's uncomfortable. It's not.
right. And to me, it requires so much humility. Like I see such a cross pollination with the people that I know who are younger because, um, my daughter, she has capacities and strengths that, she had when she was 2 that I may never develop in this lifetime. Right. And um, I think it takes humility on both sides and a lot of respect
Yeah.
because younger people can think, oh, we're the boomers, we're the idiots, we're the ones that screwed up the planet, whatever. But there are some of us who actually have, through our life experience, honed a few nuggets of wisdom that might be the perfect things that being with all those capacities could employ to really glorify what they've already got. And then we get to be humble enough to not need to be the big one, even if we are holding a space, that we don't have to be the wiser one. We can serve that to fly in a humble way. And I just see such a need to not squash, not invalidate, but also to keep an eye on ego, because we can sail off, I know everything, you're just a boomer, and actually miss the gifts that some of the members of the older generation have to offer in a humble way. And I feel like that's really going on right now with my daughter and I at this juncture, as she learns how to live from her heart in the world, graduating college without going down the conditioned pathway, like, oh, you do this and you do this and career this and career that. She's out there feeling from her heart. Well, that was the very thing I went through at 40.
Right.
Nevertheless, I went through that. And so there are things I can sort of or help her orient to true north when the dust is in her eyes. Even though she's doing it at 23, there are things about that passage that it's useful to hear from just another being who's been through it without me assuming, ooh, I'm just like wisdom girl and you're just like baby,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
In evolutionary terms, it's called transcend and include. So we
Nice.
transcend the limitations of the
Exactly.
previous generation, but we include what's useful, the wisdom gained, right? So evolution doesn't recreate the wheel, it continues on from one form to another.
I feel like we could use this talk. We could go through this talk and we could find 12 topics that we could descend into more deeply. That
12
was,
disciples.
yeah, really. There you go. 12 zodiac signs. That'd be interesting to see if we've got them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I'd love to explore this further at some point, but you're right, we are at the end of our time, and it's always fun, and just
What
gives me
fun.
a, yeah, a nice shot of um, juice for the day and for the week. I love this kind of, yeah, this is like my juice bar.
Yeah, cross pollination, I think of it as,
Yeah,
it's like the little bee of presence is humming through each of our little uh, pollen pollen flowers, kind of mixing it on up.
yeah. Mixing it on up.
Mix it on up.
Thanks
That's
for
what we can call it.
yeah, thanks for joining me for the mixer.
Yes, what a blast.
Thanks, Jeannie. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And yeah, we'll decide what the name of this conversation was later.
Yay.
All right, take care.
Thank you, dear.
Bye.